Reality, a podcast powered by Jordan's Guardian Angels. I'm Christina Janes, Director of Outreach and Awareness for JGA, and I am joined today by a very special guest, the one and only Daniel DeFabio of Global Genes fame, the Community Engagement Associate Director. Daniel, thank you so much for being here, spending some time with me today. It's great to have you.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. I'm glad you're doing this and I get to be a part of it.
Oh, it's so great. I think that we have so much to talk about today, but me introducing you on your Global Genes level hardly touches on your unbelievable bio. I mean, first of all, you're a rare dad, which explains it all, that you, this is very close to your heart. But you're a documentary filmmaker, you're a pioneer of original content online. I mean, you co-wrote and co-produced the internet's first animated series. My goodness. You've done it all. It's amazing when you start listing it out how much you've done with the Disorder Channel, the Rare Disease Film Festival. Did this all begin with being a rare dad, though, at the heart of it?
It absolutely did. You know, so many of us in this space find our world has changed, right? This diagnosis puts us on such a different path, and you have to shift. And some things we might choose to turn away from or choose to abandon, and some things abandon us, and then you have different options ahead of you. And so many of us will talk about the isolation and the loneliness, and that was definitely a driving consideration. And then there's the disease itself is rare. For my son, it was Menkes syndrome. And you start to think about that as what can you do about it, right? What can you do about it on the very small level of your own family? But then sort of I think a lot of us are struck with the injustice of it, the random genetics that hit your family, and why isn't more being done about this, right? So then as you dig into that, I think a lot of people feel the need to, nobody knows about Menkes disease. I got to make sure people know about Menkes disease. And how can I do that? Well, I can tell my son's story. So that was step one. And then all those other things you mentioned, each one's probably worth some discussion, but they came out of me first telling my son's story and that leading me to other things. And one of those things was Global Genes. The first time I went was 2015. And there meeting Bo Bigelow and realizing what we had in common, how we wanted to pursue things in a similar way to help others, and doing that. And each project sort of leading to the next. And then destiny, or whatever you want to call it, now I'm employed by Global Genes. So it sort of wrapped it up in a nice circle there. But that's a short version.
Tell us a little bit about Global Genes, just on a brief level, what you do for our families who don't know.
Yeah. So just as anyone in a rare disease specific community will have probably found, hopefully you found your people, you found Jordan's Guardians Angels, you found your disease specific group, but sometimes that only solves part of your problem and you want to go a little bigger. You need more resources or more knowledge than just your community can give you. And there are pan rare disease organizations for that. NORD is one, Every Life is one, Global Genes is one. And so we mean to bring these people together to give them more opportunities, more resources, more education, and just the opportunities to help each other, right? So the people that are further down the path can help those that are newer. Right. And so that's sort of an overall mission of Global Genes. And then what I'm doing in particular, just in the last year that I've been there, is a new online discussion community where, as you might have your closed Facebook group to talk about, Fabry or cystic fibrosis or Duchenne or any number of the 7,000 rare diseases. Again, sometimes you want to branch that out and say, what's another organization doing for their rare disease that might benefit what we're doing here? Or maybe I'm so ultra rare, there is no community and I just need the community of rare in general, or I'm yet to be diagnosed and I still need a support community. So all those things are possible on our discussion platform. Really any topic goes as long as it's rare disease, but we do try to cultivate certain topics that we know are needed, like what's it like for rare adults as opposed to pediatric rare, or central nervous system disorders of rare is sort of a unique set of needs, or financial advocacy in rare, or getting to gene-based diagnosis. So all of those things are conversations we're kind of encouraging in that community.
I think it's one of the most important parts of living in this rare disease space that you have the opportunity to speak to one another, to talk about these topics, to relate to one another. I mean, I know that what we found on our Facebook page with our global community is the same thing. My child won't sleep. My child is having aggressive behavior in some capacity. We're having problems with X, whatever X may be. But being able to relate on any level in here has been so important for our family members, and I think for the community as a whole, it's so beneficial.
Yeah, I find that we all have our unique symptoms and our diagnoses are different, but the
Right.
lifestyle experience is got a lot of common touch points. And
Mm-hmm.
sometimes you can't talk to the rest of the people. The people that aren't facing rare aren't going to be the ones that can engage on your conversations that you need to engage on in the same way. And even if it's just like gallows humor or dark, things that everyone else is going to be a little too careful about, but
Mm-hmm.
we live it and we know it, and we just have to sometimes be blunt about it.
Yeah, you understand each other on a different level, and have that commonality, that common thread there too. Um, I want to touch on your personal story because I think that so many people will relate to you and what you've been through. Um, we have had a number of families within our community who have recently lost children, have been really going through it, just as you have, and I think that they, in finding that common thread again, will be able to relate to everything that you've been through. So tell us a little bit about Lucas, his life, what you guys have been through, and what you've learned in the last few months here too.
Yeah, I'll start with when he was first born. My wife and I, like any proud parents, said, how did we get so lucky to have the greatest boy in the world? And despite any challenge that came our way since that moment, we continued to say that. We always felt that. And he I think, was maybe that not just to us, but to others too. Sometimes our special needs kids can really be magnets for the best in others. And that's it's one of the upsides we get in this kind of lifestyle.
Mm-hmm.
But Menkes syndrome has a prognosis of living 3 to 10 years. So adjusting to that, throughout Lucas's life and having that looming over us is tricky. It's heavy. It changes everything. And he beat the odds. He lived longer than those 10 years. But then you start to feel, is this all borrowed time? Are we over the limit here and it's any day now? And then the dread sort of piles up a little bit more. So it was kind of the height of COVID, the outbreak of 2020. Lucas
Mm-hmm.
died we were in the hospital in May. He died in June 5th of 2020. And
Mm-hmm.
we live in upstate New York. And at that time, New York City was probably the hotbed for
Right.
COVID cases. So I won't say that the pandemic was a contributing factor to his death, but it was a complicating factor.
Compounding. Yeah.
Yes, a compounding factor is a good way to put it too,
Mm-hmm.
especially in that we rightly or wrongly hesitated to take him to the hospital when he needed it. And, we had to weigh at the time the odds of what's worse, him getting COVID or him surviving this probably kidney problems, what it turned out to be, what we suspected it was. And, I don't really want to second guess my wife and I in our decisions. And would anything have been different? Would we have bought him a few more months of life if we had gone to the hospital 2 weeks earlier? I don't know. But losing your child is never easy. In some ways, COVID made it worse. In some ways, it's hard to believe, but COVID made it better. I'll explain that one first because I don't think anyone ever believes me on that. But if you're told you're going to lose someone you love, what would you do differently? You'd spend more time with that person. Well, we were in the middle of a lockdown. We were all not going to our jobs. We're staying in our house. And we weren't going to school. We were staying in our house. And Lucas knew the difference. He was developmentally delayed and not verbally communicative. So it's hard to know how much he understood about things. but he had a sense of his schedule, right? And our normal daily schedule was we wouldn't get to spend time with him on a weekday till about 5 p.m. Well, during COVID time, we're around a lot more. We're available to him a lot more. And he's smiling and laughing and looking at us, and sort of like the look in his eye says, you're not supposed to be here right
Wait
now.
a minute.
This
Yeah.
isn't the normal routine. And he loved it. And that's, so that was sort of the gift of the
Yeah.
pandemic, that our final days with him were more time with
Together.
him than normal. So that was great. But then, in normal non-pandemic times, our routine, I'm sure a lot of your parents, their routine, if you have to go to the hospital, you might tag team with your spouse. Like, I'll do a day, you do a day, then back and forth, and one person works and one person goes to the hospital, and that's what we would normally do. But in this situation, with limited visitation in the hospital because of COVID, and then the risk, or is one of us going to get it, or both of us going to get it?
Yeah.
I said to my wife, I'll do it. I'll do all the hospital, you stay home. Mm-hmm. And at the time, I thought that was some sort of selfless, brave act. Like, I'll take the risk of COVID for the whole family. Yeah. And in hindsight, I realize I got 6 extra days with Lucas that she didn't get. And maybe that was selfish. But we got, many parents listening will relate to the struggle to get out of the hospital. Getting into the hospital is usually 3 days minimum, maybe 7 days. Typically, every hospital visit becomes a long hospital stay. Mm-hmm. And we'd sort of fight to get dismissed. And finally, Lucas was improved enough after 4 surgeries in 6 days that they would let us go home. And we had one night together as our normal family routine, which was all of us on the couch watching television, and Lucas's little brother cracking him up and getting a smile out of him. And that's, that's always what you look for too, is like this poor little guy is recovering from surgery and distress. And do we get the smiles back? Is that our sign that things are improving? And there's his little brother to make him smile. So it was all kind of ideal. And, I say ideal, and it's in hindsight, it was our last night together. And
it was a beautiful night.
Yeah. And it was certainly better than being stuck in the hospital and not all of us being together. Yeah.
Well, I think, is there a message for our families who are dealing with something similar to what you have been through also? Do you have advice for them? I mean, I know everyone's journey is different, but if there's a way to connect on some level here.
I think many of us learn how much you are the driver of your child's health care. I think in the typical health care world, you just defer to your doctor, and your doctor tells you what to do and you do it. And maybe you get a second opinion, but that almost feels like a bold move, But in our space, whether you like it or not, I found myself in the early days often asking, well, who's doing the overarching care? Who's in charge of the whole team? And they all look around like, that's you. Yeah. And like, me, I'm not a medical expert. I don't know. Yeah. But you become a bit of a medical expert, whether you want to or not. And some of the things, I just did a blog post recently about like the one sheets you should have with you ready to hand out, because you're going to tell the same story so many times, and you're going to list the meds every time. You're going to list the surgeries every time. They always ask. And isn't it better just say, here they are, just hand them to them. Yeah. And unfortunately, we're not enough in the age of, you'd think, shared electronic health records is still a problem. You can't just, like, even within the same hospital system, for some reason, they've got to ask you again. So it took me maybe 10 years to get a little bit smart on that and say, I've got these all ready to go. Mm-hmm. And so that's one bit of advice I would say, is if you can be prepared at that level, it can actually save you some heartache and some hardship, maybe smooth things over for the medical system a little bit.
Yeah. And for our grieving families?
There's no,
I know it's hard.
I don't think there's any easy, you just have to go through it as it comes. And, we've all been told the stages of grief. And I think it's maybe not understood enough that they're not stages that happen in a certain order. And you don't get through 5 and you're done. It's not a checklist. They keep coming around again. And maybe it's a little less traumatic the second or third time they come around, but the triggers are sometimes they're what you would predict, like, oh, my child's birthday, that's going to be a rough one. And then sometimes there are other things, like back to school day was rough, because we weren't going back to school for Lucas, and just recently I watched my son, Lucas' younger brother is now 10, almost 11, and he's wearing these, they're nothing special, they're logo t-shirts, but they're cute. They look good on him. And I'm like, why does he look extra handsome in that? And then it occurs to me, those were Lucas's clothes. He's wearing hand-me-downs. And then I'm thinking, why am I a little sad about this? I'm like, because these are the last hand-me-downs. There's not going to be any more after this.
Right.
And then you follow that to its course, and it's Alex is getting to the age Lucas was, and soon he'll be older than Lucas ever was. And those things it'll be something different for everyone. But my friend, you may know Jennifer Seidman from Courageous Parents Network, and she's been great to me in this because she's been through it too. And she said, another maybe silver lining of COVID is you haven't been out there in the world having to explain this. I mean, I talk about it all the time to rare disease families, but they get it, at a level that others don't. I've yet to have the experience of meeting someone that I don't know, and they say, how many kids do you have?
Yeah.
And I don't have a great answer for that.
Yeah. You're insulated in a different way.
Yeah. I don't know if I want to be the person who answers that question. I used to have two.
Right.
Or if I say something like, I have one remaining child, I don't want to be dismissive and just say I have one child and not acknowledge that Lucas was ever part of our life. So Jennifer's point was, typically holiday season, you're going to go to a lot of hot cocktail parties and you're going to have those chit chat conversations that can be uncomfortable. But in COVID, we didn't. So is that, let's say the world gets back to normal post-pandemic next year, is that in store for me? Back to cocktail parties and back to chit chat conversations that can trigger something either for me or the other person. Like I could be totally comfortable talking about Lucas is gone and the other person is, I've just ruined their day,
Right. Well, maybe I guess the upside on that is that you'll be able to in some way steel yourself for those moments where you're feeling like, okay, I know how I'm going to eventually deal with that, but maybe it'll be a little further down the road. I mean, there's never an easy answer. But I think that it is beneficial to talk about these things with, other people who can say, okay, yes, somebody else feels the way that I do. Thank you, because it certainly is, none of this is easy. It's not easy, but I think at the core of what you're saying is being able to tell Lucas's story in a way that's going to change things for other people too, because they can see what you're doing. And by putting together the documentary that you put together for Lucas about Menkes syndrome, about him, I think that really was sort of the catalyst to opening all these doors for you, if I'm correct in saying so.
You're totally right. The first step was actually a blog post, and that was called something like How Having a Dying Child Changed All My Expectations. And that was my first public coming out as a rare disease family. And I didn't know at the time if that was just me venting or if it was going to serve any useful purpose. And the feedback I got was people saying, I needed to hear this. I feel this way too, or those type of things. So it let me know there was some value in doing that kind of thing. And that gave me enough motivation to make the film. And then making the film, you sort of run your course a little bit, in the normal film world, you do film festivals, but after 1 or 2 years, you're done with film festivals. And around that time, I met Bo Bigelow at Global Genes. And we were talking about that, like, what do you do after that with your film? How else do you get people to see your film? And we started to talk about how medical conferences are a good place to show these kind of films too, but that is, often an expensive ticket to go. And, as opposed to, a normal night at the movies being relatively inexpensive. So brainstorming along those lines, Bo and I landed on, there should be something that's a mixture between the two, between the conventional film festival and the medical conference. And if there isn't one already, maybe we should be the ones to create that.
Mm-hmm.
So that led to us in 2017 in Boston launching Disorder, the Rare Disease Film Festival. And then 2 years later, we did again in San Francisco. And then we were thinking we'd do it again in New York, but pandemic derailed. Yeah.
But then things changed. But
Yeah.
hoping that you can, sort of get back on that train eventually, because it is so exciting, and to see all of the different kinds of films. I mean, you guys have curated this immense, different categories, different. It's amazing to see who is involved, because it's such an
Yeah.
outlet for people.
Yeah, it surprises even us. When we first started the film festival, we kept checking ourselves, like, are we going to be able to find enough films? And we knew of about 5 between Bo's film, my film, and 5 of our friends,
Yeah.
And we thought, well, let's see. And then they sort of flooded in, and that was surprising. And now if you look at our channel, the Disorder channel, there's over 150 films and videos on there. And it really does do the umbrella organization type thing, right? So as did our film festival. So Bo's daughter has an ultra rare disease, and Menkes syndrome is an ultra rare disease, and almost by definition, we're going to be less known, less attention will be paid to those diseases. And so, isn't it a good strategy for us to also talk about Duchenne and cystic fibrosis and the sickle cell, and the ones that have larger populations, still rare, but the attention that's likely to be paid to cystic fibrosis is not likely to be paid to Howe Fountain or Menkes syndrome. Right. But if we're all grouped into a presentation together, we benefit from the added attention. Yep. That was kind of the premise for creating the festival and then turning it into the channel too.
It's incredible. But your advice for someone who wants to advocate in this space, how do they get started? Because it can seem daunting. I mean, not everyone can do what you did and do it well, or feel like they can do it well, I guess, in that way. So is there some advice for our families and for rare families?
Yeah, I think, first of all, the term advocate is intimidating. Even with whatever I have, 11 years experience now, and my job is full-time in a professional capacity at an advocacy organization. And yet I hesitate to call myself an advocate. And I think it's a loaded term that we're all a little maybe afraid of and misunderstanding of, because, and I just did a blog post about this too, that there are many types of advocacy. So one of them you're probably going to do whether you want to or not, and that's your medical care advocacy, right? I need, for myself or my child, I need this test, I need this surgery, I need this procedure, and I'm going to make that happen. And you will just learn that and fall into that because you don't have a choice in the matter. But then there are all these other types of advocacy, and you can, not unlike the stages of grief, I don't mean to say that you work your way up to a higher level of advocacy. They're all different, they're all valid. You might do 1 or 2 of them, you might do 6 of them. And I don't think where the intimidation comes from, I guess, is the type of advocate that can raise $2 million and fund a cure. Wow, that's intimidating. That's not me. The type of advocate that can get a new law passed at the state or national level, that seems intimidating. That's probably not me. It might be me in a few years, or it might be anyone listening to this in a few years. But at the outset, that's daunting, right? But along the way, are you going to advocate to your school system, like your IEP? I'm not getting my child's needs met at school, and I need them to. And that's just raising your voice and asking for things. I think if you look at it that way, if we take away the word advocacy and you just change it to asking for things, it's less intimidating, right? Yeah. And then there's, your neighborhood or your town or whatever. Is the park inclusive? Do you want it to be inclusive? Can they put a wheelchair ramp in if you need one? Things like that. So getting started in advocacy might creep up on you. You might not have to actually make the decision to do it. But if you are going to make the decision to push yourself in that way, I think a good first step is put your story out there in whatever way you're comfortable. Local news, great. Write a blog post, great. Podcast, the good news is there's so many of them now. I way back in 2015, when I met Bo, his was one of 3 rare disease podcasts I knew about. There was Danny Levine at Global Genes, there was two disabled dudes, and there was Bo
Yeah.
Bigelow. And now I've got a list. If you don't know it, I'll send it to you. I've got a list of about 45 rare disease podcasts.
Yeah.
So if you want to tell your rare disease story, there are people like you that want to hear it, you
Who
know?
will listen? Yeah.
Yeah. And they'll not only listen, but they'll put it out there for more people to listen.
Yes. Yes. I
And
think we're all in this together, right?
yeah, and I think each one of these things you do, right? Like you can level up, you know, if you think I want to be the one who speaks at a conference. Well, I imagine those conference producers, and I've been one of them, they'd like to see you on video speaking before they decide to let you speak at their conference. So
Right.
isn't it great that you appeared on a video conference or a video Zoom meeting or a video
Mm-hmm.
podcast, and you told your story, and now people can discover, not only discover you and consider you for other opportunities, but sort of test you, you know,
Right.
audition you,
Yeah.
whatever, you know.
Yeah. You're vouching
So
for yourself. Mm-hmm.
right, and then when you this is a big influence on Bo in particular. A lot of people call it the Matt Might model. Matt Might put out a how-to document. You know,
Mm-hmm.
when you are ultra rare and you need to find others, here's what you do, and you tell your story, usually on the internet, because we can all use the internet
Find
usually,
it.
um, and find each other, right? And you tell your story, and it becomes a beacon. It's a beacon to others, to if they are like you or if they are in a position to help you. Because if you don't tell your story, no one knows what you need. No one knows what you're up against and what might help you. And once you do, you'll be surprised who comes to you. And for me, it's been a variety of things. It's been helpful resources, sure, but it's also just been great friendships. You know,
Mm-hmm.
the people that get you are at another level of importance in your life than maybe your pre-rare disease life, you know.
Right. Right. Yeah, absolutely. So, for someone watching this that wants to get involved, whether they want something featured on the Disorder Channel or in the Rare Disease Film Festival, how do they go about doing that? And can we'll link all of this information, of course, here in our podcast notes. But how would they go about doing that? What do they have to do?
Yeah, well, if they have a film made or a video made on rare disease topics,
Mm-hmm.
you can go to thedisorderchannel.com, and under our FAQ section, there's that question: how do I get my film on your channel?
Mm-hmm.
And then when you click that, there's a short one-page form to just tell us about your film and who you are, and then you submit that, and we start the conversation with you.
Mm-hmm.
And we're always looking for more. And people might be surprised to know, I think you might assume it's all documentaries on rare disease, and it is mostly. But then we also have like puppets and cartoons, and we
Yeah.
have fictional stories that are not true, but the science is still accurate to the extent that it's present in the rare disease story. So, you know, we actually like getting non-documentaries to mix it up a bit.
Mm-hmm.
And in terms of the festival, if and when we have another in-person face-to-face festival, filmmakers would probably be familiar with a site called filmfreeway.com, which is how you submit to most film festivals. And that's how you submit to ours too. You can certainly go to our website, which is rarediseasefilmfestival.com. And then when we have a call for entries open, that'd be right there, one of the first things you see. And, you know, we also have a variety of lengths. We go from maybe a 3-minute film up to a feature-length film. So anything in that range is welcome.
I love it. It's so inclusive, and it's easy. It's open. It's there for everyone to be involved in to tell their stories, because there's so many stories out there to be told, and there's so many people who can come together and share in the rare disease space too. So thank you so much for all of this information, for being so candid, so honest, and for making us all feel like, you know, we're all on the same page here, because we truly are. So thank you so much. I appreciate you so very much.
Yeah, thanks. I'm glad to have the chance to do it with you and share it with all the people that listen to you.
It's so great, and I look forward to working with you more in the future too. So we want to make sure everybody knows that You can hear this podcast. If you're listening to it now, you found us, but you can find us on Apple, Spotify, also Google Podcasts, and always on our website where you can watch the entire video, all of our other podcasts as well, jordansguardianangels.org. Just click on the podcast link right there. So Daniel, thank you so much. I appreciate the time spent with you today, and we hope to see you again soon because we'll have lots more to talk about. I'm certain of that.
Yes, good. I look forward to it.